The trading station hung in the darkness like a metal flower, its arms reaching out into the void. Ships came and went, bringing goods from 1,000 different worlds. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation window of the human diplomatic vessel, watching the organized chaos of the docking bays below. She had been a diplomat for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Consortium. It was supposed to be exciting, meeting alien species and learning about cultures that had existed for thousands of years. Mostly it was paperwork and boring meetings. The station was called Kepler 7, a neutral trading hub where species from across the galaxy came to do business. Sarah's ship, the Horizon's Promise, was making a routine stop to pick up supplies and deliver some trade agreements. Nothing special. Nothing that should have changed everything. Sarah adjusted her translator implant and headed down to the loading docks. Her supervisor wanted someone to check on the supply manifest, make sure everything was correct. It was grunt work, really, but Sarah didn't mind. It gave her a chance to see the station up close, to watch the aliens moving about their business. The docks were loud and busy. Cargo containers floated past on anti-gravity platforms. Aliens of every shape and size shouted instructions to each other. Sarah had her tablet out, checking items off the list as they were loaded onto the human ship. Rice from Earth, medical supplies, computer components. Standard stuff, that was when she heard it. A small sound almost lost in the noise of the docks. A whimper. Sarah looked up from her tablet. At first she didn't see anything unusual. Just more cargo, more workers. Then she saw movement near a stack of containers. Small figures, maybe a dozen of them, all wearing gray coveralls that seemed too big for their bodies. They were moving in a line, carrying boxes that looked heavy. She stepped closer. The figures were children, or at least they looked like children. Some had scales, others had fur, a few had skin in colors Sarah had never seen before. But they all had one thing in common. Around each of their necks was a metal collar, dull gray with small lights blinking on the surface. Sarah's stomach turned cold. She moved closer, trying to look casual, like she was just checking the cargo. One of the children stumbled, dropping the box it was carrying. The container hit the ground with a crash. Immediately, the collar around the child's neck flashed red. The child made a sound like a broken scream and collapsed. "Hey!" Sarah started forward, but a large hand grabbed her arm. She turned to see a Kralvex, one of the insect-like species that made up a large part of the consortium's trading class. Its compound eyes reflected her face back at her in dozens of tiny images. No interference with labor assets. The Kralvex clicked, its translator rendering the words in flat, emotionless English. Consortium law. Labor assets? Sarah pulled her arm free. Those are children. They are economic resources, the Kralvex said. Your species is new. You do not understand how things work. Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but she forced herself to stay calm. She was a diplomat. She had to be smart about this. "I'd like to understand better," she said, keeping her voice level. "Can you explain the program to me?" The Kralvex studied her for a moment, then seemed to decide she was harmless. "The Juvenile Labor Initiative," it said. "Children of lesser species are enrolled young. They work in positions requiring small hands and bodies. Manufacturing, mining, hazardous materials handling. It is very efficient." "Enrolled," Sarah repeated. "You mean taken." "Acquired through legal means," the Kralvex corrected. "Purchased from families in need. Taken from overcrowded colonies, harvested from primitive worlds. All according to consortium regulations established 7,000 years ago." Sarah watched as another adult alien, this one with gray skin and too many arms, pulled the fallen child to its feet. The child was crying, a sound that needed no translation. The collar flashed again and the crying stopped. The child's face went blank and it bent to pick up the dropped box. "The collars," Sarah said quietly. "What do they do?" "Neural inhibitors," the Kralvex said. "They suppress higher brain functions, reduce emotional responses, make the assets more manageable and efficient." Simple, really. Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. She wanted to scream, to attack the Kralvex, to tear those collars off every child she could see, but she was one human on a station full of aliens who thought this was normal. Who thought this was right? "How many?" she asked. "On this station?" "Perhaps 2,000 juvenile assets." "In the consortium as a whole?" The Kralvex made a sound like static that might have been a laugh. "Billions. Perhaps trillions. It is one of the cornerstones of our economy. Has been for millennia." Sarah thanked the Kralvex and walked away on shaking legs. She made it back to her ship and straight to her quarters before she threw up. Then she sat on her bunk, taking deep breaths, trying to think clearly. She pulled out her personal communicator, the one with quantum encryption that could reach Earth instantly. Her hands were shaking as she recorded everything she had seen, everything she had been told. But video would be better. Proof. Sarah spent the next 6 hours on that station with a camera disguised as a standard scanner. She documented everything. The children working in the docks, the holding pens where they were kept when not working, packed together in spaces too small, lying on the floor because there weren't enough beds. The medical bay where she saw a child, couldn't have been more than 5 years old, being fitted with a collar for the first time. The screaming that followed. She found records too. Public records that no one had bothered to hide because no one thought it was wrong. Species cataloged by usefulness, ages listed like they were describing tools, prices. Billions of children spread across the galaxy, their minds suppressed, their bodies used until they broke. In one file, she found mortality rates. 30% of juvenile assets didn't survive to adulthood. The report listed this as an acceptable loss rate, well within predicted parameters. Sarah transmitted everything to Earth on a secure channel. Then she went to find the senior diplomat on the ship, Ambassador Rodriguez. Rodriguez was a man in his 60s, gray-haired and tired-looking. He'd been doing this job for a long time. He listened to Sarah's report with a face that grew paler with every word. "My God," he whispered when she finished. "Sarah, are you absolutely sure?" "I have video, records, witness testimony." "Sir, it's real. It's all real." Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the station. "We need to contact the Consortium Council," he said. "We need to file a formal complaint, start diplomatic proceedings." "Sir, they don't think it's wrong," Sarah said. "They've been doing this for thousands of years. They see these children as property." "Then we make them understand," Rodriguez said, but his voice sounded hollow. The next day, Rodriguez arranged a meeting with the consortium's local representative, a being called Thexlar, who looked like a tall reptile wearing expensive clothes. They met in one of the station's diplomatic conference rooms. Rodriguez presented Sarah's evidence. He spoke passionately about human values, about the rights of children, about morality and justice. He demanded immediate action. Thexlar watched the videos with what might have been boredom. When Rodriguez finished, the alien made a sound like a sigh. "Ambassador Rodriguez," Thexlar said, "your species has been part of the consortium for only 6 years. You are, forgive me, infants in galactic terms. You do not understand the complexities of managing an economy that spans thousands of worlds." "This isn't about economics," Rodriguez said, his voice tight. "This is about enslaving children." "These are not children in any meaningful sense," Thexlar said. "They are resources carefully managed and allocated. Many species contribute their excess youth to the program. It prevents overpopulation, provides income for struggling families, and maintains the consortium's economic stability." "You're torturing them," Sarah said, unable to keep quiet any longer. "I saw a child collapse from pain. I saw them kept in cages." "You saw assets being maintained according to standard protocols," Thexlar said. "I understand this may seem unusual to humans, but it is tradition. It is law. It is simply how things are done." "Then the law needs to change," Rodriguez said. Thexlar stood up, smoothing the front of its ornate robe. "Perhaps in a few centuries, when your species has matured, you will understand. Until then, I suggest you focus on matters within your jurisdiction. Good day, Ambassador." The meeting was over. Thexlar walked out, leaving Rodriguez and Sarah sitting in stunned silence. "They don't care," Sarah said quietly. "They really truly don't care." Rodriguez looked like he'd aged 10 years. "We're sending this to Earth," he said. "We're sending everything. And then we let the people decide what happens next." The transmission reached Earth 17 hours later. It arrived at the United Earth Government headquarters in Geneva first, where it was immediately classified and sent to every major government office on the planet. Then someone leaked it. Within 2 hours, every screen on Earth was showing the same images. Alien children with collars around their necks. Children working until they collapsed. Children with blank dead eyes. The reaction was not what the consortium expected. There were no protests, no angry speeches. Humanity went quiet. From the cities to the colonies, from the military bases to the smallest towns, people watched in silence. They watched, and something cold and terrible grew in the human heart. Parents looked at their own children and imagined collars around their necks. Teachers thought of their students being taken away. Soldiers remembered every reason they had ever put on a uniform. In the government chambers, in the military command centers, in places where decisions were made, humans looked at each other with the same expression. It was a look that said, "This ends. Whatever it takes, this ends." The Secretary General of the United Earth Government, James Okafor, called an emergency session. Every nation, every colony, every human settlement sent representatives. The chamber was full. The vote was unanimous. Earth would demand the immediate freedom of every enslaved child in the galaxy. And if that demand was refused, Earth would go to war. It didn't matter that humanity only had 4 colony worlds. It didn't matter that the consortium had 10,000 worlds and armies that had existed since before humans discovered fire. It didn't matter that humanity would probably lose. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth dying for. And apparently for humanity, enslaved children were at the very top of that list. The message was prepared and sent to the Consortium High Council. 30 days to comply. Free the children. Prosecute the slavers, pay reparations, or face war. On Earth, factories that had been making consumer goods switched to military production. Shipyards that had been building peaceful exploration vessels started building warships. Every human with military training was called up. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. In homes around the world, parents held their children a little tighter, and they prepared to fight so that other parents on other worlds could do the same. The consortium received the message and laughed. Humans were so young, so naive. They would learn. They would see that this was how the galaxy worked. They would back down. The consortium was wrong. Humanity wasn't going to back down. Humanity was going to burn the galaxy down if that's what it took to free those children. The clock started ticking. 30 days. And then the universe would learn what happened when you hurt a child in front of a human. The emergency session of the United Earth Government took place in Geneva, in a chamber built to hold representatives from every human nation and colony. The room was packed. Every seat was filled and more people stood along the walls. Outside, millions gathered in the streets watching on giant screens. Around Earth, around Mars, around the colonies on Europa and Titan, humans watched and waited. Secretary General James Okafor stood at the podium. He was a tall man from Nigeria, with gray in his hair and lines on his face that spoke of too many difficult decisions. But today his voice was steady. Today there was no hesitation. "We have seen the evidence," Okafor said. "We have verified it through multiple sources. The Galactic Consortium, the organization we joined 6 years ago with hope and trust, is built on the systematic enslavement and abuse of children. Not hundreds, not thousands, billions of children across hundreds of species for thousands of years." The chamber was silent. Everyone had seen the videos. Everyone knew what he was talking about. "The consortium claims this is tradition," Okafor continued. "They say it is economics. They tell us we are too young to understand. They are wrong. We understand perfectly. This is slavery. This is torture. This is evil, plain and simple." He paused, looking around the chamber. "I am activating the quantum communication link to the Consortium High Council. What I say next, I say on behalf of all humanity." Technicians worked quickly and a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the Consortium High Council, 13 beings from 13 different species sitting in a grand hall light years away. They looked curious, perhaps slightly annoyed at being summoned. High Counselor Thexelar, the reptilian being who had dismissed Ambassador Rodriguez, spoke first. "Secretary General Okafor, this is highly irregular. What matter requires such urgency?" "The children," Okafor said simply. "We demand their immediate liberation." There was a moment of confused silence from the council. Then several of them made sounds that the translators rendered as laughter. "We have already addressed this concern with your diplomats," Thexelar said. "The Juvenile Labor Initiative is a legitimate consortium program with thousands of years of precedent. It is not subject to negotiation, especially not with a species as young as yours." Okafor's expression didn't change. "You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. This is an ultimatum. You have 30 Earth days to comply with the following demands. 1. Immediate liberation of all children in the labor program. 2. Full reparations paid to every victim and their families. 3. Prosecution of everyone involved in this system, from the lowest overseer to the highest government official. 4. Permanent dissolution of the program and constitutional amendments preventing anything like it from ever existing again. The council chamber erupted in noise. The hologram showed counselors talking over each other, making sounds of outrage and disbelief. Thexlar raised a clawed hand, and silence fell. "And if we refuse these absurd demands, then we go to war," Okafor said. "Total war. We will not stop until every child is free or until we are extinct. Those are the only two outcomes." Now the laughter from the council was genuine, rolling through their chamber. A counselor that looked like a floating jellyfish spoke up, its voice bubbling through the translator.
"War, you have 4 colony worlds.
We have 10,000. You have 50 warships. We have fleets numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Your entire military could not conquer a single consortium sector. You are infants playing at diplomacy," Thexlar added. "You have no idea what war on a galactic scale means. You would be crushed in days." Okafor nodded slowly. "You're probably right. You could probably destroy us, but we will make you pay such a price that you'll remember humanity forever. And before you destroy us, we will free as many of those children as we possibly can. Even if it's only a few thousand, even if it's only one, it will be worth it." "This is madness," another counselor said. "This one with too many eyes on stalks. Over economic assets that are not even your species?" "They are children," Okafor said, and his voice was cold. "That is all that matters. We gave you 30 days. That is 29 more than you deserve. When the time is up, if even one child still wears a collar, we will consider it a declaration of war." He reached forward and cut the connection. The hologram vanished. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire chamber was on its feet, applauding. Outside, in the streets, the crowds roared their approval. Okafor raised his hands for silence. "Now comes the hard part," he said. "We need to prepare. We need to be ready." Over the next 30 days, humanity transformed. Every factory, every shipyard, every manufacturing center switched to military production. The designs for new warships that had been theoretical projects suddenly became priorities. Weapons that had been considered too expensive or too dangerous were pulled out of research labs and put into production. But humanity did something else too. Something the consortium didn't know about. Every human ship in consortium space, every diplomat, every trader, every tourist became a spy. They moved through the stations and planets asking quiet questions, taking notes, gathering information. Where were the children kept? How many guards? What were the security systems? Which species were sympathetic? Which ones might look the other way? A retired schoolteacher named Margaret Chen, Sarah's aunt, volunteered to visit a consortium world on a cultural exchange. She spent 2 weeks there, teaching alien children and quietly making maps of every facility that used child labor. She marked emergency exits, guard rotations, and weak points in the fences. When she left, she transmitted everything to Earth. A freight captain named Hassan al-Rashid made delivery runs to 12 different systems. At each stop, he met with other cargo haulers, many of them from species who were uncomfortable with the labor program but too afraid to speak out. He told them that change was coming. He gave them secure communication channels. He started building a network. On Earth, the military was reorganizing under the command of Admiral Marcus Webb. Webb was 70 years old and had been retired for 5 years. He'd fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Europa campaign. He'd seen combat. He'd lost friends. He'd seen what war really meant. When they asked him to come back to lead humanity into a war they would probably lose, he said yes immediately. His granddaughter was 8 years old. When he thought about those collars around alien children's necks, he imagined one around hers. That was all the motivation he needed. Webb stood in front of a holographic display showing the consortium territory. It was vast, overwhelming. But Webb didn't look discouraged. "We're not fighting a conventional war," he told his staff. We don't have the numbers. What we have is motivation, technology they don't know about, and the element of surprise." "What's the strategy, sir?" asked Commander Lisa Park, his second in command. "We're not fighting a war," Webb said. "We're conducting an extermination. Every facility that uses child labor becomes a target. Every government that supports the program becomes a target. Every corporation that profits from it becomes a target. We hit them everywhere at once and we don't stop." "Sir, that's thousands of targets," Park said. "Then we better get started," Webb replied. In secret bases on the dark side of the moon, in hidden shipyards in the Kuiper Belt, humanity was building its fleet. But these weren't normal warships. These were stealth vessels, using quantum technology that bent light and detection waves around them. The consortium's sensors wouldn't see them until it was too late. Every ship was equipped with enough supplies to operate independently for months. Every crew was trained in insertion and extraction, in finding and freeing captives, in fighting against superior numbers. They weren't soldiers preparing for battle. They were parents preparing to rescue kidnapped children. And that made all the difference. Meanwhile, on consortium worlds, the High Council was barely paying attention to the human ultimatum. Thexler issued a statement dismissing human concerns as cultural misunderstanding. The Council didn't bother to respond formally. They didn't even consider the possibility that humanity was serious. After all, what could one young species do against the combined might of the galaxy? But some in the consortium were paying attention. The Catherine, a mammalian species that looked almost like humans with fur, had always been uncomfortable with the labor program. Their own children had sometimes been taken, back before they became strong enough to refuse. They remembered the pain when a Catherine merchant received a message from a human asking for help, asking for information about child labor facilities. The merchant responded. Then they reached out to others. A network began to form. Species who were ready for change, who were waiting for someone to finally stand up to the consortium's old evil. On Earth, parents held their children and tried to explain what was happening. They told them that there were other children, children with scales or fur or strange skin who needed help. They explained that sometimes you had to fight for what was right, even if it was dangerous. Children around the world started drawing pictures of alien children without collars, children playing and laughing. They sent these pictures to the military bases, to the shipyards. Soldiers and engineers pinned them up on their walls, reminders of why they were doing this. Day 15 came and went. The consortium had done nothing. Not a single child had been freed. Day 20 passed. Still nothing. The consortium continued business as usual, confident that the humans would back down. On day 28, Okafor sent one final message to the High Council. You have 48 hours. Free the children. Thexler didn't even respond personally. An aide sent a written message. The consortium does not negotiate with terrorists. Your threats are empty. Return to your place, young species, before you embarrass yourselves further. Day 29. The human fleet, over 300 stealth ships, finished final preparations. Every crew member received a small patch to put on their uniform. It showed a handprint like a child might make in paint. Simple, clear, this is who we fight for. Day 30 arrived. Not a single child had been freed. The consortium had called humanity's bluff. Except it wasn't a bluff. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the flagship Righteous Fury. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the fleet. They were spread out across consortium space, invisible to sensors waiting for the order. Admiral, Park said quietly, it's time. Webb thought about his granddaughter, about every child on Earth, about the billions of alien children with collars around their necks. He thought about the teachers and parents and ordinary people who had volunteered to risk everything for children they'd never met. All ships, he said into the communication channel. This is Admiral Webb. Operation Liberation is now active. For the children, no mercy. Across consortium space, 300 human ships dropped their stealth fields simultaneously. They appeared in orbit around 50 different worlds all at the same time. The consortium's detection systems lit up like fireworks, alarms screaming. But by the time they understood what was happening, it was already too late. The first target was Tarkos Prime, one of the largest child labor centers in the consortium. The consortium assumed humans had backed down, that the threat was empty. They were wrong. Humanity had simply been getting into position. The war had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you made an enemy of every human parent, every human teacher, every human who had ever loved a child. The consortium had dismissed humanity as young and naive. They were right about young. But naive? That was their fatal mistake. Humanity knew exactly what it was doing, and they would not stop until every child was free or Earth itself was ash. The clock had run out. The burning was about to begin. The planet Tarkos Prime turned below the human fleet like a marble, blue and green with swirls of white clouds. It looked peaceful from orbit. Beautiful, even. The consortium had built their cities to blend with nature, creating parks and gardens between the industrial centers. It might have been paradise, except for what was happening inside those industrial centers. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury, watching the planet on the main display. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. They'd trained for months for this moment. Now it was real. Tactical report, Webb said. 23 child labor facilities identified on the surface. Commander Park replied. 17 manufacturing centers, 4 mining operations, 2 hazardous materials processing plants. Combined population of approximately 47,000 juvenile assets. That's what they call them, she added, her voice tight with anger. Not anymore, Webb said. From now on, they're just children. What about defense? Planetary defense grid is standard for a consortium industrial world. 12 orbital platforms, 64 surface batteries, and a garrison of about 5,000 troops, plus whatever security is at each facility. Any civilian areas near our targets? We've plotted strike zones to minimize collateral damage to non-involved structures. Most facilities are in industrial sectors. But sir, the consortium doesn't separate residential and industrial areas the way we do. There will be aliens who aren't directly involved. Webb nodded slowly. This was the part that kept him awake at night. War wasn't clean. People who weren't guilty would die. But the alternative was to do nothing, to let those children continue suffering. We follow the rules of engagement, he said. We warn civilians when possible. We don't target residential areas. But anyone who fights to keep those children in chains is a legitimate target. Anyone clear? Yes, sir. All ships begin jamming consortium communications. I want them blind and deaf, then broadcast on all frequencies, every language. The communications officer nodded, fingers flying over controls. A moment later, she gave a thumbs up. Webb activated his microphone. His voice would be transmitted to every screen and speaker on Tarkos Prime. In every language spoken on the planet. People of Tarkos Prime, this is Admiral Marcus Webb of the United Earth Fleet. We are here for the children you have enslaved. We are giving you one chance, one opportunity to do the right thing. Release every child in your custody immediately and unharmed, and we will leave in peace. Refuse and we will take them by force. You have 10 minutes to decide. This is your only warning. He cut the transmission and waited. On the surface of Tarkos Prime, alarms were screaming. Government officials scrambled, trying to understand how human ships had appeared in their space without warning. Military commanders shouted orders, bringing defense systems online. Governor Zilrath, the consortium official in charge of Tarkos Prime, stared at the communication screen in disbelief. This is madness, he said. They cannot be serious. They are one species against the entire consortium. Should we release the assets? His aide asked nervously. Absolutely not, Zilrath snapped. Those assets represent billions of credits in investment. The High Council would have my head. No, we call their bluff. Activate all defenses. Show these humans what happens when they threaten the consortium. On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Park counted down the minutes. 8 minutes remaining. No response from the surface. Defense platforms are powering weapons. Ground batteries are acquiring targeting locks. They're not going to comply, Webb said quietly. He'd known they wouldn't, but he'd had to offer. All ships execute Operation Liberation. For the children, no mercy. The first target was the orbital defense platforms. The human ships, still partially stealthed, moved with precision. Railguns fired, sending solid projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. The platforms didn't even have time to return fire. One moment they were there, the next they were expanding clouds of debris. Surface batteries fared no better. Human targeting systems, fed by intelligence gathered over the past 30 days, knew exactly where every weapon was located. Missiles screamed down from orbit. Precision strikes that took out guns and left surrounding buildings intact when possible. It took 4 minutes to completely disable Tarkos Prime's defenses. The planet was helpless. Ground assault teams, you are clear to deploy, Webb said. Across the fleet, transport ships launched. They dropped through the atmosphere like meteors, protected by heat shields and stealth fields. Each transport carried a company of Marines, 100 men and women in powered armor. They'd trained together, fought together. Now they would rescue together. Lieutenant Amara Osei gripped the handrail in her transport as it shook through atmospheric entry. Around her, her Marines sat in focused silence. Every one of them had a patch on their shoulder, a small handprint. Every one of them had volunteered for this mission. 2 minutes to drop, the pilot announced. Osei activated her helmet display, reviewing the target one more time. Manufacturing Facility 17, used primarily for electronics assembly. Intelligence suggested 400 children working there, guarded by maybe 50 security personnel. Listen up, she told her Marines. Rules of engagement are clear. Anyone with a weapon who stands between us and the children is a hostile. Take them down hard and fast, but watch for civilians. If they run, let them run. If they surrender, we accept it. We're here for the children, not genocide. Understood, ma'am, her troops replied. One more thing, Osei said. Some of those kids are going to be scared. They've been hurt, traumatized, maybe for years. You need to be soldiers getting them out. But parents, once they're safe, can you do that? Every Marine nodded. Many of them were parents themselves. They understood. The transport hit the ground hard, landing in a courtyard outside the facility. The rear ramp dropped and Osei's Marines poured out, weapons ready. The facility was a long, low building with few windows. Security guards were already responding. Aliens of various species in body armor carrying weapons. They opened fire immediately. Osei's Marines returned fire with brutal efficiency. Human weapons designed for this war, cut through consortium armor like paper. The guards went down in seconds. Breaching charges on the doors, Osei ordered. Fast and clean. The charges blew and Marines flooded into the building. Inside, they found a scene from a nightmare. Rows of workstations, each one occupied by a small figure with a collar around their neck. The children weren't running or hiding. They were still working, their faces blank as if explosions and gunfire were normal. Secure the room, Osei ordered. Her Marines spread out, checking corners, looking for more guards. The facility's supervisor at Kralvex tried to run for an alarm. A Marine stunned him with a non-lethal round. Osei walked to the nearest child, a small being with blue fur and 2 large eyes. The child didn't look up, just kept assembling circuit boards with tiny, precise movements. Hey, Osei said softly. We're here to help. We're going to get you out. The child didn't respond. The collar around its neck blinked steadily. Corporal Jackson, Osei called. We need the collars off. All of them, now. Jackson was their tech specialist. He moved to the first child, pulling out a small device. These neural inhibitors are locked with biometric security, he said. I can override them, but it'll take a few minutes per collar. We don't have a few minutes per collar, Osei said. We have 400 kids here and 17 more facilities to hit. Is there a master control? Probably in the supervisor's office, Jackson said. But it'll be encrypted. Then we decrypt it, Osei said. Move. They found the supervisor's office and the control computer. Jackson went to work, fingers flying over the keyboard. Meanwhile, more Marines poured into the facility, securing each room, finding more children. Lieutenant, one of her sergeants called. You need to see this. Osei followed him to what looked like a medical bay. Inside, she found a room full of children in beds. Most were unconscious. All of them had fresh surgical scars. They were replacing broken parts, the sergeant said, his voice thick with fury. Kids who got injured working. The ones who couldn't be fixed, He gestured to a door marked disposal. Osei felt sick. She wanted to kill someone, wanted to make them pay. But first, they had to get these children out. Jackson's status, she snapped into her comm. Got it, Jackson replied. Deactivating collars now. Throughout the facility, the collars around every child's neck went dark. The blinking lights stopped, and slowly life returned to blank faces. The blue-furred child Osei had spoken to earlier suddenly gasped, like someone coming up from underwater. It looked around, confused, scared. Then it saw Osei's armored form and started crying. Hey, it's okay, Osei said, pulling off her helmet so the child could see her face. My name is Amara, I'm human. We're here to rescue you. Rescue? The child whispered in a language the translator rendered as shaking and uncertain. Yes, you're free now. No more collars. No more work. You're going home. The child stared at her for a long moment. Then it started crying harder, but this time with relief. It reached out and Osei pulled it into a hug, not caring that she was a Marine in combat armor. Right now, this child needed a parent, and she would be one. All around the facility, children were waking up, realizing what was happening. Some cried. Some were too traumatized to show any emotion at all, but all of them were free. We need medical teams, Osei said into her comm. And transport. Get these kids to the ships. Transport's inbound, came the reply. All other facilities are secure. We're clearing the planet. The operation took 8 hours. 8 hours to hit every child labor facility on Tarkos Prime. 8 hours to free 47,000 children. The consortium military tried to respond, tried to stop the humans, but they were too slow, too unprepared. Human forces moved like ghosts, hitting targets and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. By the time the consortium fleet reached Tarkos Prime, prepared to reclaim the planet, the humans were gone. Every ship had vanished, stealth fields hiding them from sensors. They left behind burning facilities, stunned guards, and empty child labor centers. But they also left a message, broadcast on every frequency in every language. We are humanity. We came for the children. We have freed 47,000 on this world alone. This is only the beginning. Every facility in consortium space is a target. Every slaver is marked for justice. You cannot hide them. You cannot protect them. Free the children or we will do it for you, and anyone who stands in our way will burn. Admiral Webb watched Tarkos Prime shrink in the view screen as the fleet jumped to hyperspace. Status report, he said. All ships accounted for, Park replied.
Casualties, 11 wounded, none fatal.
Children rescued, 47,312. All are being processed by medical teams and counselors. And the message?
Transmitted across consortium space.
Sir, they're going to know our tactics now. The next operation will be harder. Webb nodded. Doesn't matter. They're going to know we're serious. They're going to know we can reach any planet we want. Any time we want. Fear is a weapon too. He pulled up a star map showing consortium territory. Little red dots marked every known child labor facility. There were hundreds of them. Next targets? Park asked. All of them, Webb said. We hit 50 planets simultaneously. We don't give them time to regroup, to prepare. We keep moving, keep hitting them until every single child is free. On Tarkos Prime, in a makeshift care center set up in one of the transports, Lieutenant Osei sat with the blue-furred child. The medical team had checked the child over, treated some minor injuries, removed the collar, and sedated it so it could sleep without nightmares. The child's name, they'd learned, was Lika. She was from a species called the Verasians. She'd been taken from her family 3 years ago when she was 4. She didn't remember much about her home, but she remembered her mother's face. Are you really going to take us home? Lika asked, her voice small and scared of hope. Yes, Osei promised. Every single one of you. We're going to find your families and we're going to bring you back to them. But why? Lika asked. You're not Verasian. We're not your children. Osei thought about her own daughter safe on Earth. She thought about all the human parents who had volunteered, who had given money and time and support to this mission. She thought about the Marines who had signed up knowing they might die, just to save children of species they'd never met. Because you're children, she said simply. That's all that matters. And humans protect children. All children. No matter what. Lika nodded slowly, processing this. Then she did something that made Osei's heart break and heal at the same time. She smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain, like she'd forgotten how, but it was real. Thank you, Lika whispered. Thank you for coming. Always, Osei said. We'll always come, and she meant it. Humanity had made a promise. Every child, no matter where, no matter what the cost. They would all be free. The war had begun. The first strike was complete, and across the galaxy, the consortium was beginning to understand the terrible truth. They'd made an enemy of humanity, and humanity would not stop until every child was safe or Earth itself was gone. There was no middle ground, no negotiation, no surrender. The galaxy was about to burn, and the humans were bringing the fire. 3 months into the war and the galaxy was burning. The Consortium High Council met an emergency session for the 47th time. The Grand Chamber, built to impress with its soaring ceilings and expensive materials, felt small and cramped now. Counselors who had once sat in dignified calm now argued in loud, panicked voices. Another 12 worlds hit last night, Counselor Vexenar reported, his 6 eyes blinking in distress. The humans destroyed every child labor facility on all 12 planets simultaneously. They took another 90,000 children. How? Texlar demanded. How are they moving their fleet without our sensors detecting them? How do they know where every facility is located? Intelligence suggests their stealth technology is beyond anything we possess, another counselor said. And they've had help. Several member species have been caught providing information to human agents. Then arrest them, Thexelar snapped. We have, Counselor. We've arrested thousands, but for every traitor we catch, 10 more take their place. The humans have inspired something in the population. People are starting to question the labor program. Thexelar slammed a clawed hand on the table. It has worked for 7,000 years. It is the foundation of our economy. It was the foundation, Vexnar corrected quietly. Counselor, we need to face facts. The humans have freed over 3 million children in 3 months. They've destroyed infrastructure worth trillions of credits, and our military cannot stop them. Then our military is incompetent. Our military is fighting an enemy they cannot see, who strikes everywhere at once and who seems to know our movements before we make them, Vexnar said. This is not a conventional war. The humans are not trying to hold territory. They are not trying to conquer. They only want the children, and they are very good at taking them. In orbit around a planet called Dresha 7, the human fleet prepared for another strike. Admiral Webb had split his forces, creating smaller, more mobile groups that could hit multiple targets simultaneously. It meant more coordination, more risk, but also more children saved. Commander Park stood beside him on the bridge reviewing reports. Intelligence from the Catherine network confirms 3 facilities on Dresha 7, she said. Combined population of about 8,000 children. But Admiral, there's a problem. What problem? The consortium has started moving children. They're concentrating them in heavily defended fortress worlds. Dresh 7 is one of them. There are 20,000 troops on the surface, orbital weapons platforms, and a fleet of 60 warships. Webb studied the tactical display. They're learning. Making it harder for us. Yes, sir. We could take it, but casualties would be significant. How significant? We'd lose ships. People would die. Webb was quiet for a moment. He thought about the 8,000 children on that planet. He thought about his granddaughter on Earth. He thought about every parent who had trusted him to bring their volunteers home safely. We go in anyway, he said. Those children can't wait. Calculate the best approach to minimize our losses, but we're not leaving them there. Yes, sir. The attack on Dresh 7 was the bloodiest battle of the war so far. The consortium fleet fought desperately, knowing that if they lost this world, the High Council would lose faith in their military entirely. Human ships took damage, had to retreat, had to regroup and attack again, but they kept coming, and eventually they broke through. Lieutenant Osei was part of the ground assault again. Her transport took fire on the way down, and they had to make an emergency landing 3 kilometers from their target. Her Marines ran the distance in full combat gear, under fire from consortium troops who had finally figured out that you couldn't stop humans just by shooting at them. The facility they hit was different from the others. It was underground, built like a bunker. The consortium had learned to protect their assets better. Breaching charges won't work on these doors, Corporal Jackson reported. They're reinforced, probably a meter thick. Then we find another way in, Osei said. She pulled up a scan of the facility. They're ventilation shafts. They're small, but some of us can fit. Ma'am, those shafts could be trapped, her sergeant warned. Then we move carefully. We're not leaving without those children. They went in through the vents, moving slowly, checking for traps and sensors. It took hours while children remained trapped below. But finally they reached the main chamber. What they found was worse than anything they'd seen before. The children here were younger, some of them barely toddlers. They were kept in cages, small metal boxes stacked on top of each other. Many were sick. Some weren't moving. Osei felt rage like fire in her chest. She wanted to kill everyone responsible for this. She wanted to make them suffer. But first, the children. Medical team, get down here now, she said into her comm, and bring cutters for these cages. They worked quickly, freeing children from cages, checking vital signs, stabilizing the ones who were in immediate danger. The facility's guards tried to stop them, but Osei's Marines showed no mercy. Anyone who pointed a weapon at them died. One of the guards, bleeding from a gunshot wound, looked up at Osei with hatred. You are destroying the consortium, he gasped. You are ending a civilization that has lasted for millennia. Good, Osei said coldly. Any civilization built on the suffering of children deserves to end. She left him there and went to help load children onto the transports. By the time the operation was complete, 8,000 children were free. But the human fleet had paid a price. 3 ships destroyed, 217 people dead, over 500 wounded. Admiral Webb stood in the medical bay of his flagship, moving between beds, talking to the wounded. He knew every face, had approved every deployment. These were his people, and they had bled for the mission. A young Marine, couldn't have been more than 20, looked up at him from a bed. "She'd lost her leg in the fighting. Did we get them, sir?" she asked. "The children?" "All of them," Webb confirmed. 8,000. "Thanks to you and people like you," the Marine smiled. "Worth it, then?" "Totally worth it." Webb squeezed her hand and moved on. Every person in that medical bay said the same thing. Worth it, they'd do it again. They'd give more if needed. That was the thing about humanity, Webb thought. Other species fought for territory, for resources, for glory. Humans would die for a principle. They would bleed for children they'd never met. It made them terrifying in war. But across the galaxy, the consortium's strategy was changing. If they couldn't beat the humans militarily, they would break them morally. High Counselor Thexlar stood before a camera, preparing to make a broadcast. Behind him stood 10,000 children, all wearing collars, all standing in neat rows. "People of the consortium," Thexlar said. "We face an enemy who claims to fight for morality while destroying our economy and killing our citizens. The humans say they want to save children. Let us see how much they truly value these assets." He turned to the children. "For every world the humans attack from this point forward, we will execute 1,000 juvenile assets in retaliation. This is the price of the human crusade. These deaths will be on their hands, not ours." The broadcast cut to the children. The camera showed their faces, young and scared. Then the collars activated all at once. The children screamed and collapsed. The broadcast ended. The message reached human ships within minutes. Webb watched it in his ready room alone. He watched those children die and felt something break inside him. Park found him there, his face in his hands. "Sir, the crew is asking for orders," she said quietly. "They killed them," Webb said. "They killed children to send us a message." "Yes, sir." "How many?" 10,000 confirmed. "Intelligence suggests they have more ready to execute if we continue operations." Webb looked up at her. His eyes were red. "If we stop, those children stay enslaved. If we continue, the consortium kills them." "What kind of choice is that?" Park sat down across from him. "Sir, I have a daughter. She's 6. When I volunteered for this mission, I thought about what I would want someone to do if she was the one in a collar. I'd want them to keep fighting. I'd want them to free as many children as they could, even if they couldn't save her. Because at least then, other children would have a chance." Webb nodded slowly. "We keep going." "Yes, sir. But we change tactics. We move faster, hit harder. We free children before the consortium can kill them in retaliation. And we send a message of our own," Webb said, standing up. "Get me a secure channel to Earth and prepare for Operation Hellfire." The message that went out to the Consortium High Council 12 hours later was simple. "You killed children to threaten us. You made a mistake. We are no longer accepting surrenders. We are no longer offering mercy. Every person involved in those executions is marked for death. Every government official who gave the order. Every guard who activated those collars. Every counselor who approved it. We will find you. We will end you. And we will not stop until every child in the galaxy is free or until we are extinct. Choose carefully." Operation Hellfire was unlike anything the consortium had seen. Human ships stopped holding back. They didn't just disable defenses anymore. They destroyed them. Completely. Worlds that had used child labor found their entire government infrastructure targeted. Politicians died in their homes. Corporate executives died in their offices. Anyone connected to the labor program, anyone who had profited from it, became a target. And the humans found allies. The Catherine openly joined the war, their ships fighting alongside human vessels. Other species followed, inspired by humanity's absolute refusal to compromise. Species who had been victims themselves, who remembered when their children were taken. The consortium began to fracture. Member species withdrew, afraid of being targeted. The economy, built on cheap child labor, collapsed as facility after facility was destroyed. Trade routes became dangerous as human ships hunted slavers. On the consortium homeworld, protests erupted. Citizens who had never questioned the labor program before suddenly saw it for what it was. Thousands took to the streets demanding change. The High Council tried to suppress the protests, but it was too late. The galaxy had seen the videos humans distributed, showing the conditions children were kept in. They'd seen the executions. They'd seen the humans fighting and dying to free children that weren't even their species. And they'd started asking questions. Why did the consortium need child slaves? Why had they accepted this for so long? Why were humans the only ones willing to fight? 4 months into the war, the consortium controlled less than half its original territory. They'd lost over 800 worlds to rebellion or withdrawal. Their military was exhausted, unable to predict or stop human attacks. Their economy was in ruins. And 3.4 million children were free. In the transport ship carrying rescued children back to their homeworlds, Lieutenant Osei sat with Lika, the Varasian girl she'd rescued on Tarkos Prime. Lika was healthier now, putting on weight, learning to smile more easily. She was going home soon. They'd found her family. Amara, Lika said. Why do humans care so much? We're not your people. Osei thought about all the Marines in the medical bay, all the volunteers on Earth, all the parents who had donated money and supplies. She thought about the 217 people who had died so far. There's a human saying, she said. It takes a village to raise a child. We believe that all children belong to all of us. Your pain is our pain. Your freedom is our responsibility. That's just how we are. But you're getting hurt, Lika said. People are dying. Yes, Osei agreed. But that's okay. Because you're worth it. Every single child is worth it. Lika hugged her tightly. When I grow up, she said, I want to be like you. I want to help children too. Osei hugged her back, feeling tears on her cheeks. Then we've already won, she said softly. Because that's what this is all about. Making a better galaxy for all of you. On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Admiral Webb looked at the star map. Red dots for child labor facilities were disappearing one by one as humans freed children and destroyed the infrastructure of slavery. But there were still so many left. The war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sir, Park said, we're receiving a transmission from the Consortium High Council. They're requesting negotiations. Webb smiled grimly. Tell them we have only one negotiating position. Free every child, prosecute every slaver, or we keep burning their worlds. Those are the only terms we'll accept. Yes, sir. The galaxy was burning, but from the ashes something better was being born. A galaxy where children of every species would be protected, where slavery was not acceptable, where humanity's fury had taught everyone a lesson they would never forget. Some lines could not be crossed. Some evils could not be tolerated. And if you hurt a child, humanity would come for you with fire and vengeance. The war continued, and humanity would not stop until every child was free. 1 year after the war began, the Consortium High Council sent their formal surrender. It arrived on a simple data chip, delivered by a Catherine diplomat who had been negotiating between both sides. The chip contained a document signed by all remaining counselors, accepting every single one of humanity's demands without modification or negotiation. Admiral Webb read it in his ready room with Commander Park standing beside him. The document was short, direct, and represented the complete collapse of a government that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. They're surrendering everything, Park said, reading over his shoulder. Complete liberation of all children. Full reparations. War crime tribunals with human oversight. Dissolution of the labor program with constitutional amendments. They're giving us everything we asked for. Not giving, Webb corrected. We took it. They're just acknowledging reality. He was right. Over the past year, human forces had freed 3.4 million children from 847 worlds. They destroyed the consortium's economy, fractured their government, and inspired rebellions across half the galaxy. The consortium wasn't surrendering out of generosity. They were surrendering because they had no other choice. What now, sir? Park asked. Now we make sure it sticks, Webb said. We don't leave until every child is free, every facility is destroyed, and every slaver is in prison or dead. And then we stay to make sure it never happens again. The formal surrender ceremony took place on neutral ground, on the space station where Dr. Sarah Chen had first discovered the child labor program. It seemed fitting somehow to end where it had begun. Secretary General Okafor represented humanity, along with Admiral Webb and a delegation from Earth. The consortium sent what was left of their High Council, looking defeated and old. Thexelar, the reptilian counselor who had dismissed humanity's first ultimatum, looked like he'd aged decades in a single year. His scales were dull, his eyes tired. He stood before the assembly and read the surrender terms aloud, his voice flat and empty. The consortium hereby acknowledges all demands made by the United Earth Government. All juvenile assets, hereby recognized as children with full rights, will be immediately released and returned to their families. All facilities involved in the labor program will be permanently closed. All individuals involved in the program, from administrators to guards, will face trial for crimes against sentience. The consortium will pay full reparations to all victims and their families. The practice of child labor is hereby abolished, with constitutional amendments preventing any future government from reinstating such programs. He paused, looking directly at Okafor. We surrender unconditionally to the demands of humanity. May history judge us harshly for what we have done and what it took to make us stop. Okafor accepted the surrender without gloating, without satisfaction. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. Too many had died, too many children had suffered. This was just the ending of something that should never have existed in the first place. The surrender is accepted, Okafor said. But know this. Humanity will remain in consortium space as peacekeepers until we are satisfied that these terms are fully implemented. We will oversee the tribunals. We will verify the liberation of every child. And if we find even one violation, we will consider the surrender void and resume operations. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Thexelar said quietly. The real work began immediately. Human ships spread across consortium space, coordinating the liberation of children from the remaining facilities. It was a massive logistical operation, requiring thousands of volunteers, hundreds of ships, and careful organization. Lieutenant Osei found herself assigned to one of the reunion centers on a world called Haven. It was a Catherine planet, and the Catherine had volunteered to host children while humanity worked to find their families and arrange transport home. The center was built in what had once been a school. Catherine architects had modified it, creating spaces for children of dozens of different species. There were medical facilities, counseling centers, playgrounds, and dormitories designed to feel safe and comfortable. Osei walked through the center, watching children play. Some played cautiously, like they'd forgotten how. Others played with wild abandon, celebrating their freedom. Many just sat quietly, too traumatized to know how to be children yet. She found Lika in one of the common rooms drawing pictures. The Varasian girl had become something of a leader among the rescued children, helping translate, comforting the younger ones, showing everyone that healing was possible. Hey, Lika, Osei said, sitting down beside her. What are you drawing? Lika held up her picture. It showed a human ship, recognizable by the blue and green circle of Earth on its hull, surrounded by children of different species holding hands. This is what I remember, Lika said. When you came, when everything changed. It's beautiful, Osei said honestly. I'm going home tomorrow, Lika said, her voice a mixture of excitement and fear. They found my mother. She's alive. She's coming to get me. That's wonderful, Osei said, feeling her throat tighten with emotion. I'm scared, Lika admitted. What if she doesn't remember me? What if I don't remember her? It's been 3 years. Osei put her arm around Lika's shoulders. She'll remember you, and even if it feels strange at first, you'll remember her too. Love doesn't forget even after 3 years. Will I see you again? Lika asked. I hope so, Uzi said. I'd like that very much. The reunions happened across the galaxy, thousands every day. Families who had thought their children were gone forever got them back. Parents wept. Children cried. Siblings hugged. It wasn't always easy. Many children were traumatized. Many families had changed. But they were together again, and that was what mattered. The war crime tribunals began on Earth, broadcast across the galaxy so everyone could see justice being done. Thousands of defendants faced trial, from the guards who had operated the collars to the politicians who had maintained the system to the corporate executives who had profited from it. The trials were fair, meticulous, and unforgiving. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. Defense arguments were heard, and then sentences were passed. Thexelar himself was one of the first to face trial. He stood in the courtroom looking small without his consular robes, and listened as survivor after survivor described what had been done to them. One of those survivors was Lika. She took the stand, now reunited with her mother, and spoke clearly about her experiences, about the collar, about the work, about the pain, about the day the humans came and everything changed. When she finished, she looked directly at Thexelar. You told the humans they were too young to understand, but they understood the only thing that mattered. That we are children, that we deserve to be safe. That was all they needed to know. Thexlar was sentenced to life imprisonment along with most of the High Council. Others received shorter sentences or were executed depending on their crimes. The galaxy watched it all, learning that there would be consequences for such evil. But humanity didn't just punish. They also built. The Galactic Children's Protection Accord was established, a new organization with human leadership and representatives from dozens of species. Their mission was simple: ensure that what had happened could never happen again. Protect all children everywhere. Human ships patrolled consortium space, now renamed the Free Worlds Coalition. They responded to any reports of child abuse, any hints that someone might be trying to restart the labor program. Their presence was a reminder, a promise, and a threat all at once. Earth itself changed. The planet that had been known as a young, naive species suddenly became the moral center of the galaxy. Aliens came to Earth to study human culture, to understand why humans had been willing to fight for children that weren't their own. Schools taught about the war, about the 3.4 million children freed, about the 129,000 humans who died making it happen. They learned about Dr. Sarah Chen, whose discovery started everything, about Admiral Webb, who led them to victory, about Lieutenant Osei and thousands of others who risked everything for strangers. And they learned why. Because humans believed that all children belonged to everyone, that protecting the young was everyone's responsibility, that some things were worth dying for. 10 years after the war, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Free Worlds Coalition had established laws protecting children across all member worlds. Education was mandatory. Child labor of any kind was illegal. Regular inspections ensured compliance, and humanity enforced it all with quiet, determined vigilance. Former consortium species had adapted. Their economies had restructured without slave labor. Some struggled, but most found that a free workforce was actually more productive. Innovation increased. Culture flourished. The galaxy was better. On Earth, in a park in Geneva, a ceremony was held to honor the anniversary of the war's end. Thousands attended, including hundreds of aliens. Many were the children who had been rescued, now teenagers or young adults. Lika was there, now 14 years old. She stood at a podium speaking to the crowd. "I was 7 when they took me," she said. "I don't remember much about the 3 years I was enslaved. The collar suppressed my memories, my emotions, everything that made me who I was. But I remember the day I was freed. I remember humans in armor with handprints on their shoulders. I remember a woman named Amara who held me while I cried. I remember being told I was going home." She paused, looking at the crowd. "Humans call your planet Earth. Do you know what we call it in Verasian? We call it sanctuary. Because that's what it is. A place where children are protected. A place where people fight for what's right no matter the cost." In the crowd, Lieutenant Osei wiped tears from her eyes. She'd retired from the military 5 years ago, and now worked at a rehabilitation center for rescued children. She'd stayed in touch with Lika, watching her grow and heal. Admiral Webb was there too, sitting in a wheelchair now. Age and old injuries had caught up with him, but he still attended every ceremony, every memorial, every reunion he could manage. He owed it to the people who had died under his command. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Humans and aliens mixed freely, children of every species playing together without fear. This was the future they'd fought for, the galaxy they'd bled to create. Lika found Osei in the crowd and hugged her. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "You don't have to keep thanking me," Osei said with a smile. "Yes, I do," Lika said, "because I want to be like you. I'm going to study human philosophy and join the Protection Accord. I want to help other children the way you helped me." Osei felt her chest swell with pride. This was it. This was why they'd fought. Not just to free children, but to inspire them, to show them that the galaxy could be better, that people could choose to do good. "You'll do amazing," Osei said. "I'm proud of you." Across the park, Webb sat with a group of veterans, all of them telling stories. They talked about the battles, the rescues, the fear, and the triumph. They talked about the people who didn't make it home. They cried and laughed and remembered together. A young Catherine approached their group, barely an adult. "Excuse me," they said nervously. "Are you Admiral Webb?" "I am," Webb confirmed. "I just wanted to thank you," the Catherine said. My younger sibling was in one of the facilities you liberated. She's alive because of you. Webb shook his head. She's alive because thousands of people decided she mattered. I just had the honor of leading them. Still, the Catherine said. Thank you. We won't forget what humanity did, Webb smiled. Just make sure the next generation knows. Make sure they understand why we fought. Not for glory or conquest, but because it was right. We will, the Catherine promised. As the sun set over Earth, the ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for those who died. 129,000 names were projected in light above the memorial, floating in the air like stars. Each name was a person. Each person had a story. Each story mattered. And below those names, carved into the memorial stone, was a simple message. They came for children they'd never met, from species they'd never seen, because all children deserve protection. May we never forget what they taught us. May we never need to learn it again. Around the galaxy, the lesson had been learned. Children were not assets. They were not resources. They were not property. They were children deserving of safety, love, and freedom. And anyone who forgot that lesson would face humanity's wrath. New species, making first contact with the galaxy, were told the story. They learned about the war, about the humans who changed everything. They learned to protect their young because humanity was watching, always watching. On the edge of explored space, a new species called the Ventar made contact with a Free Worlds coalition ship. They asked what they needed to know about galactic civilization. The Catherine captain who greeted them thought for a moment, then said, "Many things. Our laws, our customs, our history, but most importantly, you need to understand humans." "What about them?" the Ventar asked. "Be kind to their young, and they will be your greatest friends," the captain said. "They will share technology, culture, friendship. They are generous and curious and wonderful, but harm a child, any child, anywhere, and they will become your extinction event. This is not a threat. This is simply a law of the universe now as fundamental as gravity." The Ventar understood. Everyone understood. Humanity had written a new rule into the fabric of galactic civilization, with blood and fire. Children were sacred. All children, everywhere. Years passed. Decades passed. The generation who fought the war grew old. Many died, remembered as heroes. Their children carried on their work, serving in the Protection Accord, teaching new species, ensuring the peace held. In a small town on Earth, in a retirement home, former Lieutenant Amara Osei sat in a comfortable chair watching the sunset. She was 82 now, her hair white, her hands shaking slightly with age. But her mind was sharp and her memories were clear. A young reporter sat across from her, recording an interview for a documentary about the war. "Do you regret it?" the reporter asked. "The war cost so much. So many died. Do you ever wish it had happened differently?" Osei thought about Lika, who was now a senior official in the Protection Accord, working to help children across the galaxy. She thought about the millions of other children who had been freed, who had grown up to have families of their own. She thought about the galaxy they'd created, imperfect but better. "Not for a second," she said. "We did what needed to be done. We paid a price, yes, but those children paid a much higher price before we came. We just balanced the scales." "What do you want people to remember about the war?" the reporter asked. Osei smiled. "I want them to remember that we didn't fight for territory or resources or power. We fought because we saw children suffering and decided it was unacceptable. I want them to remember that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And if you could go back knowing everything that would happen, would you do it again?" "In a heartbeat," Osei said without hesitation. "Every child is worth it. Every single one." The interview ended. The reporter thanked her and left. Osei sat alone, watching the sunset, thinking about the children playing in parks across the galaxy, free and safe and loved. The galaxy had burned. They'd set the fire themselves, deliberately and without mercy. And from those ashes, something better had been born. A galaxy where children could be children, where species protected each other's young, where the old evils had been destroyed and new hope had taken their place. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean, but it had been worth it. Every child was worth it.